It is January 28th, 2025. First up, we have the Minnesota Department of Administration and Commissioner Tamara Gronvall. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair, committee members. I'm Tamara Gronvall, the Commissioner at the Department of Administration. It's really good to be with all of you today and see many of you again. Thank you for your continued support of admin's important work across the entire state and in many of our communities. And before I forget, with me today is admin's Legislative Director, Julie Byro. I'm happy to share the details of admin's capital budget requests, and I've brought with me some of our property and facility experts, and we're ready to answer your questions. In our time together today, I'll do two things. First, I'll review at a high level the state's deferred maintenance and asset preservation. And number two, I'll provide a preview of the governor's budget requests. First, to help illustrate the critical need to fund agency asset preservation requests, please consider the following information on the state's deferred maintenance. First, Minnesota owns over 4,800 buildings spread across 19 state agencies. This adds up to more than 34 million square feet. These buildings have a replacement value of over $11.2 billion. The average age of these buildings is 43 years, with 45% of those buildings over the age of 40. Admin has calculated that the deferred maintenance on these buildings to be an estimated $2.2 billion. I want to highlight the importance of asset preservation and taking care of what we have. The governor continues to recommend a significant portion of his bonding bills go to fund state agency asset preservation projects. Asset preservation has become an increasingly important challenge for state agency operations. Adequately maintaining state facilities is imperative to support the efficient and effective delivery of services and programs to our customers and the people of Minnesota. Asset preservation funding provides improved safety and better government while also protecting state investments in the following ways. First, funding asset preservation and maintaining property stewardship ensures that staff, the public, and custodial individuals are kept safe and that functional needs are optimally met. Next, timely planned preventative maintenance reduces the total cost of ownership, eventually freeing up resources for core program functions. Next, the cost to maintain a building is cheaper than the cost to repair it. The green line on the graph above illustrates the cost per square foot to repair our state-owned buildings, depending on the building condition status. The blue bar graph also reflects the percent of state-owned buildings within each building status category. Addressing some of the backlog to remain current on repairs is efficient budgeting because it costs more to fix, breaks, and respond to urgencies than to fund planned upkeep. Finally, funding asset preservation requests save energy and reduce greenhouse gases. Modern, properly operating buildings use less energy and water, making agency buildings more operationally efficient while reducing energy costs. Now I'll move on to the governor's recommendations for admin. First, the governor recommends additional investment to maintain CAPRA. That's the acronym for the Capital Asset Preservation and Replacement Account. CAPRA is the state's rainy day fund and covers emergency repairs and hazardous material abatement for state agencies. This program ensures that when state agencies experience unanticipated emergencies in their facilities, they are operational again quickly, and that construction projects are not delayed if hazardous materials are discovered. Demand for these emergency repair funds has grown due to the increasing age of state facilities and limited funding for preventative maintenance. Admin estimates the deferred maintenance backlog to be $2 billion for state-owned properties, as I mentioned at the top of the presentation. For example, in the spring of 2024, CAPRA funds were used to address flood damage on state-owned property, as well as roof, water main, and sewer line replacements. A full listing of the $8 million of emergency repairs from 2024 can be found in the annual CAPRA report. CAPRA funding is also a critical operational need. I cannot overemphasize the importance of this funding being included in the bonding bill, no matter its size. Very little CAPRA funds are currently available, and a few weather events or hazardous discoveries could completely deplete the fund this year. This could leave agencies with no choice but to divert operating funds and as a result reduce service to resolve building emergencies. Next, the governor recommends providing resources to implement additional security upgrades recommended by the Advisory Committee on Capital Area Security, also known as ACAS. These upgrades were identified in the 2014 Physical Security Study and the 2022 Security Assessment Update. The 2014 Physical Security Study was focused on the physical vulnerabilities of the facilities on the Capitol complex and was performed by architects, engineers, and security professionals. It examined the structural, landform, and architectural elements of structures. It assigned security risk levels and priorities, and it provided the recommended physical security improvements for the complex. The study was completed in June of 2014 and updated in 2022 to include changes to threats and costs. If the vulnerabilities identified in the original and updated study are not removed, there could be loss of life, assets, and an impact to government operations. This photo shows the new turnstiles and security kiosk in the admin building, which were made possible by a portion of the $10 million appropriated in 2018. While this funding has been much appreciated across the Capitol complex, considerable vulnerabilities remain. Over half of the Capitol complex population and building square footage has not received the security upgrades necessary to improve safety and security. So we are asking for resources to make progress to close those gaps. Finally, the governor recommends a budget-neutral policy establishing the state building renewable energy, storage, and electric vehicle account. This would enable admin to leverage federal funds for renewable energy and energy storage upgrades at state-owned facilities. Admin will apply for and accept federal cash rebates on behalf of the state for these eligible renewable energy projects and EV fleet purchases. Dollars would be used to help fund future renewable energy projects. In sum, here's an overview of our requests. Thank you for the opportunity to present admin's capital budget requests, and thank you for your support of admin's requests, which improve our communities across our entire state.
Thank you, Commissioner Grunwald. Members, are there any questions? I have a couple. So you were talking about the Capitol complex security upgrades, and you said in 2018 there was 10 million allocated?
That was the amount that was appropriated. There was a larger amount requested, but that was the number appropriated at that time.
And that was to be used for the recommendations from 2014's advisory committee. Was any of that, was all of it used? Or did you say none of it was used? I couldn't.
I believe it was used. Yes, it was.
Okay. And I don't know if you, do you know what it was used for? No.
I could take a moment just to check. One thing to keep in mind is some of the security data is not public. I can provide at a high level some of the security measures that were installed, but if you want specific information, I can provide that to you offline. But a couple examples: installation of bollards, projectile-resistant glass, additional key card readers, security kiosks. There's a list of them. I can keep
That's
going.
good. Okay, thank you.
We can
That's
provide
good.
that information.
And I'm not sure, thank you. I'm not sure if you can give me what any examples would be of the Capitol Phase 3 security upgrades that are still yet to come.
That still need,
Yeah.
need to be funded. Here's what I'll say at a high level. Admin works closely with security staff at all Capitol buildings to assess those security infrastructure needs, and consistent with the direction provided by the Advisory Committee on Capitol Security, we will work with agencies and the committee to implement those security upgrades. A few things that have been done in the very recent past: there's a temporary security desk at the Vets building. There's plans for permanent security at the Vets Services building and the History Center, which should happen within this year. There was
Perfect.
also weapon screening a few years ago installed at the Judicial Center.
Thank you. That was all my questions for that. Oh, Senator Pappas, then Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome, Commissioner. And could you walk us through some of the projects that you've been funding with the CAPRA account? I think we could it'd be helpful for the members to dig a little deeper into those, so we kind of know what's needed. It was a large amount that was appropriated in '23, larger than normal, $9 million. When you look back, typically we've been doing like $1 million into that account. So hopefully you were able to deal with more emergencies then.
In the last year, using fiscal year 2020 appropriation, there were public safety upgrades at a few different public safety facilities. There were emergency repairs completed at some of the correctional facilities. In the human services arena, there was some replacing of water mains and a garage roof. There was some repair of underground pipes, construction of a water sewer connection. In the public safety arena, upgrading some office safety, replacing broken sewer lines, replacing exam controls. In the human services area, there was some replacing of water mains. There was a repair of a roof structure. In Veterans Affairs, there was replacing of a sanitary sewer line, repairing of a lift station, replacing steam traps and boilers, and repairing water damage. I don't know how much more detail you want, but those are a few examples. There was also some emergency repairs, again, at some additional correctional facilities, again, that were emergency and water and sewer related.
Follow-up, Senator Pappas?
Okay. And last year, we spent $8 million.
And thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioner. How much is left in the account then?
Commissioner?
1.9 million.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Pratt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my question was going to be very similar to Senator Pappas. How do you determine how much should be in the CAPRA account? Because I'm looking back at the previous request, $5 million in 2018, $10 million in 2020, $7.5 million in 2022. How do you determine what the appropriate level for that account should be? And how do you work with MMB to ensure that we don't issue those bonds before they're needed?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner?
Senator, thank you for that question. My understanding is that the amount of CAPRA funds requested is always more than ultimately that is appropriated. The money is needed for emergency repairs and to address the hazardous abatement. So we can make estimates, and we'll do the best that we can to make estimates based on the deferred maintenance of a particular building. Sometimes those things can be flagged as being deferred maintenance, for example, can possibly be flagged, but we do our best to make an estimate as to what we might need. There's certainly a concern that there's too little in the account right now to address emergencies that will come up.
Follow-up, Senator Pratt?
Thank you. Well, I guess I'm kind of looking at the annual balance, and I can kind of back into how much you spend. I'm just kind of, it looks like somewhere between 2023 and 2024, there was a lot being expended out of that account. And I'm hoping we're not necessarily doing that for deferred maintenance, that we're using it as it states for emergency purposes. But I'm trying to figure out, how do you determine the appropriate balance that should be in that account?
Commissioner?
Madam Chair. Senator, these are funds that are used for emergency repair, so I want to clarify, I was not speaking about deferred maintenance. We can sometimes identify that an emergency can or is likely to occur if there is a building or a structure or a system with significant deferred maintenance that has not been addressed. So that's one general way of estimating the need for funds in the account. And if you have questions, additional questions about what was spent specifically for those years, we can provide those to you.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I'm just
Senator.
asking, how do you determine how much you're going to request and what you think how do you determine what you think that account balance should be?
Commissioner.
The admin spends, if you look at the CAPRA, Madam Chair, Senator, if you look at what's been in the CAPRA account and what has been spent in the last, let's say, the last 10 years, it's generally in the range between 300,000 and 5 million. So using both those last 10 years, as well as identification of severely deferred maintenance, projection about emergency events that might be caused by weather, it seems like it's roughly been in that range. Of course, an emergency or a weather event can take place that's twice that much. And if we don't have the money in the fund to address the emergency or the hazardous abatement, agencies are in a really tough spot to come up with the funds for that. I hope I've answered your question.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you. And if I could just ask Ms. James, have we seen cancellations in this account that we've had to go ahead, or do they issue the bonds ahead of time in order to fund the reserve that's in this account?
Madam Chair, Senator Pratt, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay,
Yeah.
I can find out. Thank you.
Or we can look into it too. Yeah.
Thank you. Members, any other questions for the commissioner? Senator Nelson.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, is there a list, or maybe you covered it already? Are there revenue funds in the Department of Administration that might help with some of these things? Does the Department of Administration have any revenue funds?
Madam
Commissioner.
Chair, Senator, no, I'm not aware of it.
Okay.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, seeing no other questions, thank you, Commissioner Grunwald, for coming, and Julie.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee.
Thank you. All right, next up, we have the Minnesota Department of Public Safety. Commissioner Jacobson, Drew Evans, and Colonel Christina Boyevich. Welcome to the committee, Commissioner. And go ahead, just state your name for the tape.
Yeah, good afternoon, Chair Housley, members of the Capital Investments Committee. I'm Bob Jacobson, the Commissioner of Public Safety. It's my honor to be here today, and thank you for having us present to present our capital budget items. On the next slide, just wanted to point out the governor and the lieutenant governor have put forward a strong proposal to help address current issues and the future needs for public safety in Minnesota. Our law enforcement divisions serve every community in Minnesota, and building a new lab, for instance, in Mankato, will help evidence turnaround throughout the state of Minnesota. All of these projects that you're looking at on the screen throughout the entire state include really important projects, including, number one, the new Southern BCA Regional Office and Laboratory, also BCA Bemidji Regional Office and Laboratory expansion, and building the Minnesota State Patrol headquarters using trunk highway cash. Today we have both Superintendent Drew Evans and Colonel Christina Bogievich, who can each describe the merits of these funding proposals. So with that, I'll turn it over to first Superintendent Evans.
Go ahead, Superintendent.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Drew Evans. I'm the Superintendent of the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, and we thank you for your time today. These are projects that we've had in front of your committee before, and they're critically important to serving Minnesotans across Minnesota to meet our public safety and criminal justice needs. The first project that I'll talk about is the Mankato project, and what has driven us to this place is really the growth that we've seen throughout the state of Minnesota, just in terms of the trends and what we're addressing. We've seen some things like mandatory testing of all sexual assault examination kits in our state and reducing the turnaround time down to acceptable levels so victim survivors have answers in their cases more quickly. Digital evidence, just 10 years ago, we didn't even have a team doing this. It was one agent part-time. We have 22 digital evidence examiners. And when I first started at the BCA, we may or may not have seized a piece of digital evidence. Now it is in every single case that we do, and we have examiners doing that work. Methamphetamine and opioids continue to challenge many of our communities across the state of Minnesota, both in drug investigative work that the BCA does with our local partners and then testing that evidence. And then internet crimes and child sexual abuse material and exploitation of children have really exploded over the last 10 years. We also have a 200% increase in DNA analysis over the last decade. Controlled substances have nearly doubled in the last 5 years. And as you can see, the cyber tips that I noted before have risen 353% in just the last 5 years. And every single one of those cases has a digital evidence component. And go next slide. This is what's driving some of that. We're simply out of space at this point in time. And in particular for us, the laboratory space is highly specialized space that takes a significant amount of space that has to be very specific to the needs and the testing environment we have. The criticality of this is that we are simply out of space completely. We are located at our headquarters location in Maryland Avenue here in St. Paul. We are really in the process right now of reconfiguring all of our office space to maximize the space. And once we do this, we're literally out of space for what we can do at that facility. And so this is partly planning for that. We're 175 staff over capacity at our Maryland Avenue facility for what it was designed to accommodate currently today. These are just a couple of examples. On the right hand, for me at least, that's a firing range that's testing. That's not for law enforcement officers to do practice. That is for our laboratory. And those guns are in barrels. That should not be stored there. It's an example of just simply being out of space. That should be clean with those black walls on each side and our evidence storage in that location as well as Max. Some of this is meeting that for a regional facility. It makes a lot of sense to us. Some ask, why not just add on to the BCA? One of this, by doing this, creates efficiencies in the Mankato location. We own the land and we've designed the building. You previously appropriated funding to buy that land and then do design. This is a shovel-ready project. We are in the last and final stages of completing our design for that facility. Right now, it's nearly complete, and this would allow us to gain some of those efficiencies. Minnesota, as you all know, is a very large state geographically. One of the things that our scientists do, as much as they do evidence testing, is testifying in court to their analysis. By relocating regionally across Minnesota, we gain efficiencies simply by not having to drive as far. For example, Rock County, Minnesota, far southwestern corner of the state, if we had a scientist testify, they're coming from St. Paul. That's all day down, all day back. We lose time in the laboratory as opposed to being out of Mankato and going to that facility from there. We also have a regional training facility. We have been working hard to identify locations that 90% of law enforcement will be within an hour of a training facility for BCA programs. People may not realize this, but we train 6,000 to 9,000 law enforcement students through our BCA programs every year, and this would be one of our regional hubs as well at this location. This means that law enforcement doesn't have to spend time in hotels. They lose people for staffing their shift. They can go to the training and go back and be ready for the shift the next day as opposed to traveling back and forth and staying in the metropolitan area where they do right now often. Another important component of regionalization is we get a lot of evidence mailed to us in the U.S. mail. That's obviously not a good practice that we would like to see eliminate where we can, but we also can't ask small jurisdictions to drive 4 and 5 hours one direction to drop off evidence. This would take in evidence at that location. And then lastly, we would have our crime scene team. We have 3 teams on call for Minnesota. They were out twice this weekend. Alone out of our St. Paul location. 2 teams are out of St. Paul. 1 is out of Bemidji currently. We would relocate 1 team down to Mankato so that we would have better response times across all of southern Minnesota, which is busier than our northern Minnesota location. You can go next slide. These are just examples of what we have done to maximize the entire BCA, and we'd welcome any members who'd like to tour at any time as to where we've done so far and maximizing down to really 6x6 cubicles for office space throughout the building wherever we can, and we've maximized what we can do. You can go next slide. This is another example in the left hand for you. That's a NIBIN station, which is a National Integrated Ballistics Information Network. This is what we use to correlate guns and cartridge casings at crime scenes to tie them together to other crime scenes. We just don't have enough space to adequately address this. In the middle is where we build computers for our staff, which is just not enough space. And then we have agents sharing offices already. Next slide. This is an example of what, when laboratory space-wide specialized. That's a drug laboratory on the left-hand side of your screen. Those are gas chromatograph, mass spectrometer, very common instrumentation for doing drug analysis. Those hoods are because they have to off-vent gases. They give off a lot of heat, so there's a lot of specialized HVAC, redundant power supplies that need to be, specialized network connections, et cetera. And then this is part of what drives costs for a facility like this. You need a lot of space for a laboratory that just has to be that to be able to adequately do the examinations. And then the office space our scientists use when they're doing their reports are down to those same type of cubicles that you can see. Next slide. So this is, as I noted, the Mankato facility. We own the land. The design is complete. It will be a $68.6 million for construction costs to build that facility. We will initially staff it. Originally, we had looked at about half staffing. Because we're so over capacity, we will look to fill this facility immediately because we're so over capacity at our current locations through voluntary transfers. And then also when we have turnover, we're due. This isn't adding more people with this project. This is relocating people across the state of Minnesota, and as I noted, 40 to 50 FTEs in that location. This is a fairly accurate rendition at this point in time of what this facility looked like, a two-story facility. Down that glass area will be the training facility where we'll host people on site, the first floor being investigations with the laboratory occupying the second floor. Go next slide, and go again. This is our facility in Bemidji. I'm sorry.
Superintendent, Senator Pappas has a question. Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Superintendent. Before we move on to Bemidji, could you just talk to us and with the committee about the reason for the significant increase at the Mankato facility over last year? I think last year we were looking at something like 46 million, and then to go up to 68 is kind of shocking. Could you kind of explain that to us?
Superintendent Evans.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Housley and Senator Pappas for the question. It went from 48 million to 68 million. It was a jump. This is due to simply, in talking to the Department of Admin, a couple of factors in particular. And construction costs continue to go up, and when they calculated the cost, the significant rise still in construction costs. The second piece, and why we go through this design process with a project like this with specialized laboratory space, is that there were some part of the pre-design, some of the support for a specialized location like this that houses gases, maintenance of the building, all these different areas were not adequately accounted for, and so additional space was needed to support a facility of this size. And then third, occupying that space immediately actually drives up the cost. Because it's a specialized building, when they put in all the workstations that are built in for a facility, it's not all modular furniture, investigations is, but the laboratory is, you know, like you normally see in like a science area with the specialized countertops. Building all that out adds the cost with equipment, and that's what's driven it, because we need the space immediately.
Senator Pappas. You're good. All right, continue on to Bemidji.
Thank you. And again, just to reiterate, the construction costs increasing were the biggest driver in that calculation from there. Bemidji is in the same boat. Bemidji, what we're looking to do in this location is to basically double the size of this facility, which would mirror the size that we're proposing for Mankato. You can see this is just, I won't go through this chart on here, but the bottom line is we need additional staff. We've moved additional space for our staff. We don't need additional staff at this location. We would relocate people here as well. We have people in, there was originally a library, which we don't need, but it was used as a conference room. We've converted it to office space. We've done everything we can at this facility to maximize space, and we need to double that. And as you can see, this building was opened in 2001. The submissions to that location have gone up by 150% since 2004. And so we anticipate to see those rates. We've been remarkably accurate at predicting our caseload year to year, and we expect that to go up over the next 20 years. And so this would get us the space we need for the next 20 years. You can go next slide. Part of that is driven that we haven't mentioned before, but it's for both facilities. We have an independent force investigations unit that we house there as well. That wasn't there when we first opened this facility to respond to northern Minnesota. Digital evidence didn't exist there. We literally have them in a closet right now that we converted in that location. And then we have these other specialized areas that we've talked about that are really specialized exams. Go next slide. Just some additional examples of where the cramped space is and where people are together. On the right-hand side, we do have some specialized system. That's a CODIS room. That's offline. Our scientists can't access some of our most sensitive databases on their own laptops. They need to go into a specialized room to do that, and so we need the space for that. This was built in 2001, and we're looking to double it to 53,000 feet. This is asking for land acquisition costs and seeking a design cost to double that. If you look at the building that you see, that's a rendition. On the right-hand side of that picture, that's our current facility, and then the gray piece you see on the left would be the addition. This would allow us to have no disruption to our services. They would buy a piece of land that is owned by the city of Bemidji that's up against the airport there. We would connect the two buildings, so we'd basically build a building, connect them, and that way there'd be no disruption to our services at that location. Any other designs we've seen, we'd have significant disruptions in our examinations for 2 years. And so that's approximately $4.2 million, which is similar to the cost from the previous submission.
Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Superintendent. Is that 4.2 million just for the land acquisition, or does that include the addition, the expansion? Is that the full cost?
Superintendent.
Chair Housley, Senator Pappas, thank you. That is for the design cost and the land acquisition
Okay.
combined. It is not the construction cost. We would come back to you when we understand the full construction cost.
So you don't know what, sorry, Madam Chair, Superintendent, you don't know what the construction costs will be yet?
It was previously predicted at around $40 million, but this is part of the design process. Given how much has gone up, we have not asked for a reassessment of that as part of the pre-design because of what we're seeking this year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. Now we go on to Colonel Christina Bojojevic.
Good afternoon, Chair,
not
members of the
funny,
committee.
Kuczynski.
Christina Bogoyevich, and I have
Bogojevic.
the honor of serving as the Colonel of the State Patrol. As the Commissioner mentioned in the beginning, our project was outlined in the Governor's recommended budget to be funded through trunk highway cash. And so this is a space that will bring 6 antiquated offices throughout the metro under one modernized roof. When we talk about the State Patrol spaces that we lease throughout the metro, there are 2 operational districts, our East and West Metro, that serve the 7-county metro area, and then 4 other office spaces, commercial vehicles, headquarters, investigative services. I forgot what the last one was, sorry about that. Training and development, which serve everyone in the state of Minnesota. And so bringing these all together under one roof will allow us to build synergy between leadership, assist with recruitment and retention. As we bring people in for recruitment seminars, we're bringing them into leased community college spaces, not our own space, to show what our tradition is. It'll allow us to expand our evidence storage. Again, these leased buildings were never meant to be true law enforcement buildings. And so as we go through our accreditation process, which we received money for in 2023, we are really realizing that the space that is offered don't fit those standards. And so it would allow us that evidence space, both indoor and outdoor, and then accessible free parking for the members of the community that are coming in. And as I go through, sorry about that, approximately $97 million, which I didn't mention in the beginning, is for the build. We were given money last year for the design and land acquisition, and now this year we are coming for the build money. You can see here, this is our central headquarters, downtown St. Paul. We have, again, no free parking for anyone to come in. The building itself doesn't say State Patrol anywhere on it. The room on the right just shows many of the office spaces also store equipment in it because we have run out of room. The picture on the left here is our East Metro District headquarters, and many of you toured that space. This is the one table that office has in it, multiple purposes. This is where troopers eat lunch, this is where investigators go through evidence, and this is where we have families who have lost family members in crashes that we go through fatal files with. On the right there, you can see the investigations office with very small evidence lockers for troopers to place evidence into. Again, kind of the same scenario in our West Metro. Our training rooms are often used for equipment storage rather than training purposes. And then our evidence storage, which I spoke about earlier, being inadequate in these spaces. MnDOT has been kind enough to give us some, or allow us to use some outdoor equipment, but again, we are talking about equipment that we used during 2020, and now it's sitting outside without being in indoor storage for much of that equipment, excuse me. Again, as we talk vehicle storage on the left there, you can see that was a crash car that we have to keep per the prosecutor. We either lease storage from tow yards or it's kept outside. On the right, you can see several squads. When a trooper squad car isn't working or needs to be towed, they have to go and get one of these squads, which we can't keep inside because we don't have that storage space. And just a few more examples of the metro area spaces, some temporary air filtration services due to evidence storage. And with that, I am open for questions.
Thank you, Colonel Boyo, I'll get it.
okay.
Bogojevic. Yevich? Okay. Bogojevic. Bogojevic. Bogo. Bogojevic.
There you
Okay,
go.
say it with me, people. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you. I was just going to say, I spent enough time on the transportation committee. I know it's Bogojevic, so it's pretty easy. But thank you, and I thank you, Madam Chair. I don't disagree with the need, but taking this from trunk highway funds is a serious concern to me. We used to call it leakage. This is a theft. We are stealing money from our highway funds to build this facility. We don't take funds from our higher ed to build colleges and maintain our colleges. This is a theft from our money that's supposed to be used for roads and bridges. We should look at a bonding from the general fund, or GEO, but this should not be coming from the trunk highway funds. I'm sorry, I've been vocal about this. I'm going to continue. Colonel, you do a great job. I love the State Patrol. I support them 100%. I've tried to get helicopters funded, planes funded. You all know that. But this is a theft of the money that we should be using for our roads and our bridges in this state. Minnesota, and I wish Senator Johnson Stewart was here, the roads have been rated at a C+ to a C- in this state, and now we're taking money from our funds for roads and bridges away from what they're supposed to be used for. And Senator Newman used to call it leakages. This is a theft. This should not be used for this building. This building should be funded through GEO bonds, just the way we do for colleges and universities. So I am severely disappointed that this is coming out of the governor's budget out of trunk highway funds. Thank you.
Commissioner.
Yeah, Chair Housley, Senator, again, appreciate the comments and appreciate the support for the Minnesota State Patrol, first of all. They are a wonderful organization with a proud tradition of doing the work, and they do great work keeping all Minnesotans safe. So again, the support that you have continued to share with others, including leadership of the Department of Public Safety, is very much appreciated. As we went through this budgeting proposal and process, the one thing that was clear to me going through this is that we absolutely needed this space for the Minnesota State Patrol. As you can see, just some of the pictures that stick with me are, the room with a table where state troopers will eat their lunch. Later on, they'll process evidence, and later on, they'll speak to victims who perhaps have lost a loved one in a serious crash. So the current space that we have to not only serve our troopers who are doing this work, but to serve those around the state of Minnesota who are looking to us for assistance is sorely needed, better space than that. The concern about how this is being funded, I certainly appreciate that. This is, as you know, not the first time that I've heard that comment. What I will say to you and to members of the committee, we are absolutely open to other ways of funding. All I can tell you right now, sir, is after, again, continuing to be commissioner here for 2 years, seeing the space that we have, whatever you can do to properly fund and build a facility for the Minnesota State Patrol. I think it is sorely needed and sorely overdue, sir.
Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, and thank you, Commissioner. I definitely agree this is needed. There's no doubt this needed, but for the governor to balance his structural deficit with our trunk highway funds is not what should be being done here. We have people in Minnesota who pay into a gas tax, they pay their license tab fees, they pay their motor vehicle sales tax, and that's not to fund a State Patrol headquarters. It's there dedicated to be built for roads and bridges. And as I've said before, and I wish Senator Ann Johnson Stewart was here because her group of engineers came in and said how poor our roads are here in Minnesota. And again, this is really just a gimmick on how to fund this through the governor's administration and trying to fix his structural deficit by doing this. And I know it's tough for a lot of people in the administration to say that, but that's what's being done here, and it's the truth. And it should not be done this way. We need our money for our roads and our bridges to be used from this fund, not for buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Jasinski, and maybe the governor is watching. Commissioner, I do agree. We did tour your facility, and those rooms are not adequate for all of the different areas of work that are going on in there. Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Jasinski, I admire your passion on this issue. This whole funding thing is really giving us all a headache. You know, we need to be able to fund our higher ed facilities with especially asset preservation. DOC is going to come up in a few minutes and talk about their needs. We have less money than last year, 980 down to 790 million, and this is a big hunk to take out of 790 million as the maximum we can borrow. And I don't know if in transportation you had a discussion about trunk highway bonds that came up recently. That trunk highway bonds are counted against the third guideline. So some things that the Transportation Committee has done in the past in terms of spending using trunk highway bonds is impacting our ability to use GO bonds. So we're a little bit in competition here between funding roads and bridges and funding buildings throughout the state. And that, I'm not even talking about local government needs, which is significant. So I just don't know. We heard from superintendent about the BCA buildings, which we should all agree are really important, and another need coming after Mankato from Bemidji. That one, the Mankato one, is increased from 48 to 68 million because of specialized needs that they have. I invite you to, help Senator Housley and I figure out, the committee, how we're going to take care of all these issues in our bonding bill this year. I'm hopeful that we'll have a large number for next year, and some things are going to have to wait till next year to be funded, and some things like the superintendent's BCA project have already been waiting for a number of years.
Thank you, Senator Pappas. Senator Frantz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Jacobson, Superintendent Evans, Colonel Bogoyevich, thank you. The needs you're describing are obvious, and you should count on this committee and the legislature to try to figure out how to get those needs met. Senator Jasinski, you and I were freshmen together on the Transportation Committee. You invoked the name of Scott Newman, and you're right. He always was concerned about leakage. Having said that, if our choice is no State Patrol headquarters or State Patrol headquarters funding it through the fund, I think I would support funding it and getting it done, because I think that's what the people of Minnesota want us to do. It's okay if we disagree philosophically. I would just mention, since you also invoked the name of Governor Tim Walz, Governor Walz proposed an increase to transportation funding that was voted down more than once. And so we're going to have to ask the people of Minnesota what it is they want us to do. Do we want more money for transportation? If we do, public safety is the jurisdiction of transportation. And then for all of us, Madam Chair, as you mentioned the Mankato project, which it's not the Mankato area, the immediate area that is really crying for this. It's my friends and neighbors south, west, far away that are sending officers 2-3 hour drives to bring evidence. And we're frustrating our criminal justice efforts. So needless to say, I'm anxious to support the Mankato and Bemidji projects, not just for the Mankato area, but for all Minnesotans who want us to emphasize public safety. And if I may, the reason it's 68 and not 46, Senator Pappas, is because we didn't do a bonding bill last year. And so as we go to talk to Minnesotans about the need for a bonding bill, let's just face it, this is argument number one. The projects get more expensive. And if we're not able to do it this year, we better ask ourselves, Madam Chair, what's it going to look like a year from now or 2 years from now? We have to make some tough decisions. We have to get bonding done. Looking forward to the funding discussion, Senator Jasinski. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, the three of you, very much for your work.
Senator Pratt, and then we'll wrap this up.
Thank you, Madam Chairs, and thank you, Senator Frentz. I think you did a good job of laying out the need. And I don't think anybody's arguing about the need. The question is about the priority. When I met with the supervisor last week, we talked about prioritization and we talked about phasing as a way to make sure that we hit the most important parts first and manage the cash flow going on. We've got a lot of road projects that we need to do, and those go directly to public safety. I was glad to see the Highway 169, which I know you're a big supporter of, through Jordan, as the last stoplight between St. Peter and Champlin get finally removed. We've had way too many accidents at that spot. It's all about public safety, and I think we can all get on board with that. The question isn't what, the question is how. And it feels a little bit like using the trunk highway funds is borrowing from Peter to pay Paul in this case. And I would hope that we could find a way to stage it, a way to prioritize it so that we hit the most urgent needs first, and maybe look at future projects down the line, and then making sure that we allocate the funds in a way that they're most useful in the immediate future so that we can continue to space things out and Senator Pappas manage our exposure through the bonding guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Pratt, and thank you, DPS and Commissioner, Colonel, and Superintendent. We will see you again soon. Thank you. Next up, we have the Minnesota Department of Corrections. Commissioner Paul Schnell, and when you're ready, you can go ahead with your PowerPoint presentation. I think you got to get it hooked up first.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Paul Schnell. I'm the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Corrections. And I thank you for the opportunity to testify on the governor's bonding bill priorities for the department. The DOC is the third largest state agency with a footprint that includes 11 prisons and with 336 buildings, covering more than 7.5 million square feet. This extensive infrastructure is critical to our mission and requires constant attention and upkeep. Our buildings run continuously, 24/7, 365. We have approximately 4,300 dedicated employees working across these facilities. We house 8,300 incarcerated people. And it's important to note that 96% of the department's funding comes directly from the state's general fund, which underscores how vital state support is for our operations. The DOC is also heavily dependent on capital investments from the legislature. These funds are essential to maintaining infrastructure and ensuring that we can meet the evolving needs of our facilities. Members, we take our mission extremely seriously, and that is to transform lives for a safer Minnesota. This work is critical because 95% of those incarcerated in our prisons will return to communities across our state. Investing in infrastructure improvements for Minnesota state prisons is not just about sustaining buildings, it's also about keeping communities safe. Maintained facilities provide the necessary space for effective rehabilitation programs, such as education, job training, and mental health. These programs also play a critical role in reducing recidivism and helping incarcerated individuals reintegrate into the community. When individuals are better prepared to return to their communities, they are less likely to reoffend, which directly contributes to better public safety and fewer victims. We have the duty to ensure that when individuals are released, they are equipped with the tools to succeed and contribute to safer, stronger communities. Turning to the two DOC bonding requests, you should have a one-page summary of our request in your materials. For those of you who have toured our facilities, it should not be surprising that our first priority is asset preservation. The numbers on this slide speak for themselves. Of the deferred maintenance needs of all state-managed properties managed by state agencies, 33% of the need, one full third, is within the Department of Corrections. The estimated cost of improving DOC infrastructure to just fair condition is $732 million. Currently, the department has 16 buildings that are in crisis condition and 61 buildings in poor condition. As I'm sure you have heard many times in this committee, when maintenance is deferred, it only grows more expensive. Just 3 years ago, the estimate of deferred maintenance was $631 million. It has now grown $101 million in just the past 3 years. This significant cost is due to the age and complexity of these facilities. Prisons encompass many of the aspects that would occur in an entire municipality, including health care, water, sewage infrastructure, housing, grounds, educational opportunities, commerce, manufacturing, and recreational spaces. They also include extensive and complex security systems that require ongoing maintenance for the safety and security of the facilities themselves. As you can see from these images, this is just a small sample of the deferred maintenance across Minnesota's prison facilities. These are places where individuals live and work 24/7. These photos do not provide the full story, so we have made significant efforts to invite legislators to see the prisons directly. Over the past year, we've hosted 26 legislative tours, bringing in 84 members of the House and Senate and over 55 legislative staff members inside the walls and razor wire to see the work and conditions firsthand. Investing in these repairs and upgrades is essential for extending the lifespan of both older and the newer facilities. Timely maintenance helps prevent larger, more costly issues in the future. Many of our prisons are aging, with 2 of the facilities more than a century old. However, it's important to note that the oldest prisons, such as Stillwater and St. Cloud, don't make up the majority of asset preservation on the asset preservation project list. In fact, even though they make up 53% of the DOC's deferred maintenance, 83% of asset preservation projects are for facilities that other than these 2 older facilities. This means that the scale of the investment required to maintain and improve our infrastructure goes well beyond the oldest facilities. By keeping these facilities in good condition, we promote the safety and security of everyone in the system. It allows for more efficient operations, reducing disruptions and long-term operational costs. Moving on to the second of the department's request is a critical expansion of rehabilitative space at the Rush City facility. For reference, there is a separate handout in your material summarizing this project. Members, before I speak to the project and the need for this space, and I want to talk about why this one made it into the governor's bonding bill. The need for this project is urgent. Since the prison was built 24 years ago, the state of Minnesota has not effectively engaged the high-risk incarcerated men who reside there to improve public safety outcomes, reduce recidivism, to reduce crime, and nor have we done enough to mitigate the intergenerational impacts of incarceration, as men in this facility are warehoused instead of rehabilitated. We cannot risk the impacts of past mistakes in prison design and budget pressures to allow this continue for years and perhaps decades to come. Throughout my time as commissioner, it has become crystal clear that the severe lack of space at the Rush City Prison has resulted in lost opportunities to improve correctional outcomes. When the Rush City Prison was designed, The intention was for it to be single bunked, and even then, it was also intended to have more programming space than was eventually built. However, before it was opened in 2000, the decision was made to double bunk the facility, meaning twice as many incarcerated men in that facility and a cut in the programming space. This lack of space for rehabilitative programming creates something of the worst practice in corrections, and that is an idle population. Idleness means incarcerated individuals are not participating in programming, they are warehoused. Today, about 1,000 men are incarcerated at Rush City, and 1/4 of them are completely, entirely idle. Many more have some level of programming, but not as much as they could use. Not only are critical opportunities for transformative rehabilitation programs missed, like education and sex offense treatment and substance use disorder treatment, we know that those sitting idle during their incarceration actually increases the likelihood of reoffending when they are released to the community. The prison in Rush City has the highest rate of idleness across the Department of Corrections. The prison should have had programming space, and I ask this committee to consider addressing this problem so that we, as we go forward, can improve these outcomes. And make no mistake, the prison in Rush City isn't going anywhere. An expansion will be used for decades and decades to come. Rush City is the newest DOC facility. It is also one of the 3 level 4 or close custody prisons in the state system, with the other 2 being Stillwater and St. Cloud, both more than 100 years old. Moving on to the significant lost opportunities that this space presents is, I'd like to explain briefly the well-known and proven best practice in corrections, that is the risk principle. The risk principle simply is that we should apply our most significant resources to those who need them most, to those who have the highest risk levels. Members, those who are incarcerated at Rush City have some of the highest risk levels in our system, yet providing them with rehabilitative services is limited. You can see here that 200 men incarcerated at Rush City do not have a high school GED or diploma. Providing this level of education is required of the Department of Corrections by state law, subsequently using up all available classroom space to the capacity the fire marshal will let us. And even when we use all the classroom space for GED service, the wait list is extensive. Because of this, the DOC is not able to provide post-secondary educations at Rush City. There's no space to expand vocational opportunities or career tech programming at these facilities, and we cannot accomplish this at the Rush City facility. Men who are incarcerated there are unable to obtain post-secondary credentials to help them exceed. Further, over 50% of the population at this facility require behavioral health treatment. Yet the facility has 2 small appointment rooms, sometimes requiring therapy staff to find spaces in common areas for therapeutic appointments with men living there. Over 300 men at this facility are on wait lists to receive sex offense treatment programming that is critical, but we do not have the space other than an old double-wide trailer that was set up with movable walls and sound machines to increase privacy for these therapeutic services. And I would be remiss if I did not name that the prison has some of the worst racial disparities in our state system, which is a sobering reality, the disparities that exist in prisons overall. At Rush City, however, 55% of those incarcerated are Black, 7% are Native American. And we have to do better to provide these men a chance to succeed and, importantly, improve public safety outcomes. Members, in closing, I'll say once again that 95% of those in our prisons will return to communities across our state. We are all safer if they do so successfully. We know that individuals who participate in rehabilitation programming are 43% less likely to return to prison. Our communities will be safer and healthier if we can provide these programs, and critically, so are their families. It is painfully clear how dramatic an impact of incarceration can have on kids of incarcerated parents, and 73% of the prison population are themselves parents. Their success creates better outcomes for their kids. I want to thank you again for the opportunity to present the DOC's two requests. It is the nature of work in corrections that is often out of sight and too often out of mind. Behind the brick walls and razor wire, the people who are incarcerated, those who are working in these facilities are often hidden. In the most basic sense, the state's prisons are where the failures of society, unaddressed traumas, the impossible challenges of our government are hidden. Whether it be the failures of education or the child welfare system, mental health access, economic opportunities, or racist systems, our correction system is left to deal with these challenges and are expected to produce better outcomes. Your interest in these outcomes and conditions of confinement can make the difference. We are not ignorant to the political realities on both sides of investing in prisons, but outcomes of incarceration matter, as do the well-being of our staff, the incarcerated population, and their families. And with that, Co-Chair Housley, I will stand for any questions you or the committee may have.
Thank you, Commissioner Schnell. Members, questions? Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for being here today. And I appreciated the tour that I was able to get on the bonding tour, stopping at the prison in Stillwater. And I know, I believe it was back in 2023, there was a major security incident at Stillwater where there was, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner, more than 100 inmates who basically refused to go back into their cells. And I was wondering if, how would you characterize that security event? How do we make sure it doesn't happen again? And then were there consequences for those inmates who were effectively disobeying your correctional officer's orders and created a major security situation that garnered nationwide attention?
Commissioner.
Co-Chair Housley, Senator, yes. First and foremost, what prompted that really was, in many cases, the conditions. That facility around that time was over 100 degrees, and if you went into the kitchen area, we know that temperatures in Stillwater's kitchen can sometimes reach 125 degrees. These conditions just become very difficult to manage. And on that particular day, we had a group of individuals who refused to switch back in, go back into their cells as they were directed, which prompted the large response that we all became aware of. Were they addressed through a discipline process? Yes, they were. The people who participated in that failure to comply with the direct orders of staff were all faced discipline for their involvement in that incident. The question around what do we do to prevent it is really, I think, focused on the fact that we are investing year after year, biennium after biennium, in many cases, millions of dollars in infrastructure that is over 100 years old that we simply cannot make safe for our staff or for the population. And just the investment in HVAC systems, improving HVAC systems at that facility are staggering. And so I think the answer really is, what is the long-term solution as we go forward to address either likely replacement of this old infrastructure? Because it does certainly affect the operations, not to mention all of the safety elements that go along with that old of a facility.
Senator Rasmussen, follow-up.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner. And I just hope that, and I don't think this is what you're trying to say, but, I hope that this committee doesn't respond basically to inmates and kind of a riot in terms of, oh, we need to provide public dollars because they're not happy with their situation. I think, the answer that most Minnesotans would say is, well, maybe you shouldn't have committed the crimes that, brought you to Stillwater Prison. And I would just encourage you, as we're continuing to look at some pretty serious safety issues, especially in Stillwater in regards to synthetic drugs being smuggled in, staff getting hurt, that we just use the full prosecutorial powers that we have to refer cases to county attorneys to prosecute, and that we make sure that we just have discipline at our correctional facilities. I think is really important if we're going to be investing dollars into it. Then, Madam Chair, I have another series of questions, but you can go on to the other members too.
I'll go to Senator Pappas and then come back. Senator
Thank you.
Pappas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I also have a series of questions, so I'll try not to be too long with them. One simple question is Commissioner Schnell, so the 5797 requested for Rush City, is there an increase in that from last year's request?
Yes, I'm sorry, Co-Chair and Madam Chair and Senator Pappas, yes, there is an increase of $11 million.
11 million increase.
Due to inflation, yes.
All right. Then, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a little bit more. So when we toured Stillwater, and I think it might be important for people to, anybody who can, to see Stillwater's 4 tiers, built over 100 years ago. It's not just really the way we design prisons today, not safe or healthy for inmates or staff who have to also live in an unair conditioned, work in an unair conditioned building that can get extremely hot, especially on those top tiers. However, speaking to this whole educational issue, while we were there, we spoke to a young man who asked to be transferred into Stillwater, even though he was coming from, I can't remember where he was coming from. He was coming from an air-conditioned, though, prison. And he asked to go to Stillwater because he wanted the programming opportunity. He wanted the educational opportunity. And so many, I feel, of the incarcerated people, they do really want to be busy. They do really want the opportunity to take classes, to go to therapy. And that idle number is also not very safe for, we were speaking to correctional officers today in my office for them because, idle people, especially if they're hot, can get into trouble. Anybody can get bored, can get into alterations because of the heat or the boredom or whatever. And it's not really preparing people for integration back into civilian society when there's that wasted time. So I certainly have been a strong supporter of this programming idea. I understand now why you want to do it at Rush City. As the newest prison, it makes more sense to invest in that. And one more thing is, I'm sure you went around, I remember with Commissioner Pung probably was the commissioner, that when Stillwater, when Oak Park Heights was built, that was, I think, supposed to be an alternative for Stillwater, and Stillwater was supposed to close then. And it just never happened. Do you remember, am I right with that, Commissioner?
Commissioner.
Madam Chair and Co-Chair Pappas, yes, that was the initial plan, that facility would begin to address the high security needs that Stillwater had long addressed. But obviously, population pressures and growth over the course of time made that impossible.
Thank you.
Senator Rasmussen. Oh, Senator Pratt.
Thank you. Madam Chair, and just a similar question that we asked DPS. Commissioner, I noticed that the expansion at Rush City is going up about $10 million over what was proposed just last year. Can you talk about what changes are causing that increase?
Commissioner.
Madam Chair, Senator Pratt, yes, I think this is really inflationary cost increases. Literally, that much of an increase is what the recs have put in for the increase in that change.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick follow-up. So we're seeing basically a 25% increase in inflationary costs, and not just there's been no changes to the design or plan at all?
Commissioner.
Madam Chair, Senator, no, there has not been any fundamental changes in terms of the design structure for that project.
Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioner, to that point. So in that amount that was originally done before, what amount is the new governor's new clean energy standards? What % of the project is attributable to the clean energy standards?
Commissioner.
Madam Chair, Senator Jasinski, I don't know. We can certainly find that out from the folks who are working on the pre-design side and get that information to you.
Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate getting that.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner, as you're probably aware, there was, I think, a lawsuit a couple of years ago where we had transgender identifying inmates within the Department of Corrections system who were basically demanding through their lawsuit a transfer to a women's only prison. And I was wondering if you could update the committee on the status of that. And I think there's a settlement associated with it. And is any part of this capital request tied into that settlement or that lawsuit for those individuals to basically, go to, I believe it's Shakopee Women's Prison. Is that correct?
Commissioner.
Madam Chair, Senator Rasmussen, yes, we did settle a lawsuit. The settlement amount was $495,000. As part of that, this is a national issue where we have to provide responsive medical care. It's constitutionally required medical care. And it was on the basis of that the settlement agreement was reached. It has nothing to do with bonding whatsoever. And if I could, I would just like to address the issue of the statement relative to our response to people being in prison and the manner in which, we're not here to suggest and request bonding money to make it easier. We're here to request bonding money because right now what we're doing is throwing good money after bad, year after year after year, as we make some of these investments just to keep some of these buildings standing. As the commissioner from administration talked about, just the amount of emergency dollars we've spent on water issues at facilities in Faribault, at facilities in Lino Lakes, Stillwater, it has been immense. And these are all things that are drawing dollars, some from that emergency funds and some of them from AP funds. And this is just basic kind of quality of life, which, again, I would say that the Department of Corrections has a constitutional obligation to provide, and that's not this administration's decisions. That is decisions that have come down from the United States Supreme Court.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner. I guess one other, it's not a part of your budget request today, but as we have gone on the bonding tours across the state, we're starting to see more and more requests from counties to basically upgrade their jail facilities. And very commonly, whether we're in the metro area or in rural areas, what they're pointing to is Department of Corrections mandates that are requiring them to upgrade those facilities. And I was wondering, Madam Chair, if the commissioner could speak to that, because we're seeing, just the request on jail upgrades that point to Department of Corrections guidance, it's probably over $100 million in requests as we've gone to different communities, and this is something that they're really struggling with. And is there any flexibility that the Department of Corrections can offer to some of these communities that are otherwise going to have to undergo a very major investment?
Commissioner.
Madam Chair, this is, I think, a very similar problem to that the state faces, where we have an incredible number of county jails across our state that are antiquated and aged and are in the very same position as some of our state correctional facilities. And I just want to point out that oftentimes the standards to which we hold county jails, because there are national standards around the requirements or general requirements for jails that have been codified here, some in statute and some in rule. that frankly, you know, we have to apply because that's our requirement from a regulatory standpoint to county jails, that we oftentimes can't apply to ourselves, and sheriffs are frustrated with that, and for good reason, and I understand it. But these are the standards that we face that are grounded oftentimes in lawsuits that have occurred not just in Minnesota but across the country. And that's what guides that. And I would also say that as it relates to the sunsetting of jails, and that's the way the Department of Corrections would set a sunset and say that jail is beyond its life and either needs to be substantially upgraded or replaced. We have worked with counties, in many cases, for a decade or more, to allow counties to develop a plan for that. And one of the things that was funded that, you know, we will be able to talk about at another time with you if you'd like, is a study that we recently did around looking at jail infrastructure across the state. Some of the needs and even the opportunities that may exist around things like consolidation, you know, intergovernmental collaborations, because we're hearing this from county commissioners and some sheriffs, that these are, we know, significant challenges for counties across the state.
Senator Rasmussen, follow up, and then wrap it up.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner. And I guess, you know, that just brings up a good point where I think why we are seeing that frustration from our county sheriffs and county commissioners where they're being held to a standard that the state isn't meeting in the state facilities. And I think just any, as a part of this committee's work, would appreciate a continued conversation on those standards and what are public policy choices that the state has some control over and what are things that are truly outside of our jurisdiction, to make sure that we're not unnecessarily creating, again, $100 million plus capital needs for our counties across the state, especially when, you know, the budgetary concerns are a lot tighter than they were 2 years ago. So just a comment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. And did you want to respond, or you're good? Okay. Thank you so much for coming to the committee today, Commissioner.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Next up, we have the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, Deeds Commissioner Kevin McKinnon. Welcome to the committee, Commissioner. I saw you yawning back there, so it's your turn.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. Kevin McKinnon, I'm the Deputy Commissioner of Economic Development and Research at DEED, and here today to talk about the two items that DEED has in the Governor's Capital Investment Bill. As Devin brings up the PowerPoint, the two programs that we're talking about today are the Greater Minnesota Business Development Public Infrastructure Program, for which we are requesting $2.7 million. This program started in 2002. We've done a couple hundred grants all across Greater Minnesota with this fund. The second program that we have is called the Transportation Economic Development Infrastructure Program, which is basically done in concert with the Minnesota Department of Transportation, which I'll get to. But so the first one is the Business Development Public Infrastructure Program, or BDPI as we refer to it. These are grants to local units of government outside the 7-county metro area. We can cover 50% of the cost of the public infrastructure needed to support business expansion. Typically, that's water, sewer lines, road extensions, et cetera, for projects to support, as mentioned, development within the cities. Cities are eligible for up to $2 million every 2 years. And generally, we're making awards roughly around $500,000 for a lot of our projects. These are for industrial uses primarily, manufacturing, transportation, warehousing, et cetera. and really has been used to lower the cost of development for cities, for developers and businesses throughout Greater Minnesota. We accept applications on a rolling basis, so as communities have the needs, as businesses have the needs of expansion, they would apply to us, and we then award those projects. A couple of years ago, there was some changes made to this program where if you're doing an industrial park, 15% of that industrial park may be used for ancillary uses. So if you think a service station may be necessary to serve a warehousing park, we allowed that. And also, if the intended development doesn't happen within 10 years, there is a provision that allows any other lawful use to go in there and use the infrastructure that we have provided. A great example of a BDPI project, of which there are many across the state, is Cold Spring Brewing in Cold Spring. They needed a couple of wells, obviously, to help with their brewery and their expansion. We awarded nearly $1 million for that project. It was a large job creation project in Cold Spring, and obviously a large private investment to match our award. As far as our pipeline goes, currently we have just over $5 million in our pipeline. In the last biennium, or in this biennium, we've received $4.5 million from the general fund and $10 million in general obligation bonds, for which we are obviously spending down. As far as our pipeline goes, we don't have any applications in currently. However, we are always talking to communities and their projects, and we know that there's roughly about that much that's out there. When they come in, we just don't know. Second program that I mentioned is the TEDI program. This is the joint effort with the Minnesota Department of Transportation. We're requesting $1.8 million for this program, which started in 2012. We've done more than 40 grants across the state in conjunction primarily with MnDOT's TED program, Transportation Economic Development Program. What this program does is provides land acquisition, construction costs, reconstruction, other infrastructure improvements that cities are responsible for when you go into a transportation improvement where the state might be coming in with building a new interchange. There's a lot of land acquisition, et cetera, that local units of government have to make. This program operates on an RFP process. We do it once a year, generally in conjunction with MnDOT if they have funding for their program. Obviously, this helps local units of government with the costs of the transportation improvements. And these funds cannot be used on trunk highway improvements, but the improvements that the city needs to make leading up to those improvements. Good example of a project is the city of Dayton, where we provided $1 million to help realign traffic and make a safer environment for a large industrial development that's happening with multiple businesses. There's been over 648 jobs created and a lot of private investment in facilities up there. Current balance in that program is $62,000, and we are out of money and obviously requesting to do another grant round, which we would probably do sometime in late September or early October. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Deputy Commissioner. I would really like to see a list of all the projects that you funded. If you could send that spreadsheet to me, I'd appreciate that. And what it kind of looks like is that we maybe overfunded a little bit the BDPI, because you still have $10 million in that pot, correct? And maybe we underfunded the TEDI, because you're now short for pipeline projects.
Commissioner?
Madam Chair, Senator Pappas, we have $5 million remaining out of the 10 that was provided in GO bonds in the last biennium. So the balance, including both the general fund and the general obligation bond funding in this last biennium, we have $5 million remaining.
Senator Pappas?
Okay, I was just kind of confused by your graph that says your current balance is 5 million, but you received 14.5, because you received money from the general fund, 4.5, and you received 10 million in GO bonds. So I think it would just be helpful to see then what the money, how the money was spent. Great, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Pappas. If you could send that to all the committee members, that would be helpful. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. McKinnon. I think both these projects are wonderful. They've done so much work in Minnesota. I've seen so many projects succeed because of them. Just a little bit to Senator Pappas's comment. So BDPI is very important to have a fund balance because obviously the economy goes up and down. Interest rates go up and down. That really drives a lot of commercial development. So when interest rates are a little bit higher, which they've been for the last couple of years, then the demand will go down. But a lot of times those projects need that money available, and if that the fund is not available in the fund at that time, it doesn't get done. So keeping a good solid balance of the BDPI I think is very important. I actually have Senate File 582 up tomorrow in jobs, and we'll be asking for 2.5 million. So I guess I was off a couple $100,000. But again, I think the project is great. I've seen it work so good in southern Minnesota. So many towns in southern Minnesota have benefited from this. The economic development and the manufacturing jobs and the jobs created is just tremendous. So again, thank you for this, and look forward to funding it. And again, just remember that fund really needs to stay high in the BDPI because, as again, interest rates go up and down, the demand comes and goes for that. So if rates start going down, the demand for BDPI is going to go up a lot. And if the money's not in the fund at that time, the project a lot of times will not get done. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Jasinski. Members, any other questions? All right. Thank you so much, Commissioner, for joining our committee today and for your presentation. And we'll look for that list.
Great. Thanks,
Thank you.
Madam Chair. Thank you, Senators.
Next up, we have the Minnesota Amateur Sports Commissioner. Minnesota Amateur Sports Commission. Commissioner Johnson. Director Johnson? Or is it?
Pardon me.
What's your title?
Executive Director.
Executive Director Johnson. Welcome, and go ahead when you're ready.
Great. Madam Co-Chairs, members of the committee, my name is Todd Johnson. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Amateur Sports Commission. With me today is my colleague and the only other Minnesota Amateur Sports Commission staffer, Cara, and she'll be making the presentation today if she gets this called up.
Director Johnson, can you just speak a little bit closer to
sure.
the microphone? Thank you.
Yep.
Madam Chair, Committee, my name is Cara Lodge. As Todd mentioned, I am the Managing Director of the Minnesota Amateur Sports Commission. Thank you for your time this afternoon. As you know, the Minnesota Amateur Sports Commission is a small agency. Like Todd said, you actually have the entirety of our staff in front of you today. We are tasked with driving economic impact through sports tourism and promoting the benefits of amateur sports. We provide strategic guidance for facilities and act as a convener for amateur sports organizations statewide. Popularly, we are known for the governance of the National Sports Center in Blaine. In 1990, the commission created a nonprofit, the National Sports Center Foundation, to manage the National Sports Center, the state facility. The complex today is the largest of its kind in the world, home to 4 million visitors annually. For those that may not be familiar with the National Sports Center, the facility spans 700 acres and features 23 buildings, 60 athletic fields, 8 ice sheets, 2 indoor courts, and an 18-hole golf course. The foundation has a small full-time staff, but they're also supported by over 1,000 contractors and over 200 part-time and seasonal workers. Together, we generate events and activities that drive over 80 operators to our campus and over 4 million annual visits. Together, these activities and events also generate over $90 million of economic impact to the state of Minnesota. Our flagship event is USA Cup, an international youth soccer tournament that brings 16,000 athletes to Minnesota from over 25 states and over 15 countries. Notably, this impact and activity is sustained without any operating dollars from the state of Minnesota. Throughout its history, the facility has been maintained primarily by the foundation, with periodic support through bonding dollars and CAPRA dollars in the event of emergency repairs, which have been continuously more frequently occurring. As we examine the facility's capital needs to sustain its level of operation, we utilize the Department of Administration's Facility Condition Assessment Report, which you've heard referenced many times this afternoon. Our facility as a whole has a replacement value of nearly $206 million, and its deferred maintenance is at $79 million. Our greatest need across our campus is at the Super Rink, which is that 8-sheet ice facility mentioned earlier. The current replacement value of the rink is $125 million, and its deferred maintenance costs are $58 million, all of which is rated by the report as being in crisis or poor condition. Demonstrating the scale of the rink's need, you can see the pie chart of the rink's crisis-rated deferred maintenance, and that compares the rink's deferred maintenance to all other state buildings combined. The next visual demonstrates the deferred maintenance percentage of a replacement value by agency, also included in the report. You'll just see highlighted here that the commission has the highest percentage. As Super Rink infrastructure reaches the end of its anticipated lifespan, the facility can no longer tolerate one-off repairs, and it needs significant renovation. We engaged B32, an engineering firm that specializes in ice rinks, to map the scope and cost of necessary changes. Together, we identified a need of about $23 million to support these critical upgrades, which you'll see at the original request aligns there. Included in these changes are ice plant replacement, which would include R22 changeout. R22 is no longer legal to purchase, so our rink, as well as others across the state, need to address this. Would also include dehumidification, lighting and electronics, low E ceilings and internal finishes, and accessible boards that would help make our facility more accessible to wheelchair users and sled hockey participants. And then, like the Super Rink, as I mentioned, ice arenas across the state many of them are still working to fund their R22 changeout. To support this need statewide, we requested additional funding to the James Metzen Mighty Ducks Ice Arena Grant Program. This program provides financial assistance to help eliminate the use of R22 refrigeration, as well as improve arena's indoor air quality. The program receives a consistent stream of inquiries from rinks across the state. There's enough demand that previous award periods have provided awards that are less than the maximum requested and/or permitted to help us maximize and broaden the impact of the dollars that the program has received. As you can see, both requests support use of our facilities across Minnesota and their users, and would help maintain the current level of service and the impact of these facilities to our amateur sports athletes. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Lodge. Senator Pappas?
Senator Pappas always has a question. Thank you so much for the presentation. And I'm just curious, with the Super Rink renovation, you requested $23 million. The governor's recommending $8.6. what does that mean? I mean, what can you do with 8.6? Or is the expectation that the foundation would raise the rest? Or what's the plan there?
Ms. Lodge?
Madam Chair, Senator, we did deploy a task force to look into a variety of options for funding this project. I think we are known for getting creative and crafty and utilizing the funds that we do receive to the best of our ability. We would need to look into additional funding through the foundation, which, as I'm sure you could understand, has limited debt capacity and could possibly place more burden on our participants. But we would need to look at supplemental funding through the foundation.
Senator Croon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I was actually on that task force. And I can tell you that while the National Sports Center is exceedingly creative in coming up with revenue streams and has demonstrated that over the years, there is a limit to how far that can go with the deferred maintenance needs on the campus at the National Sports Center. And so we'll take whatever we can get, and we will make do the best we can, given whatever the situation is. But these deferred maintenance needs are dire, and I would, in full disclosure, I am on the Amateur Sports Commission, as is Senator Gustafson as well. And so I think, just a comment, and then I'll have a question for you. But, as was said, there is no state funds received for operations here. And there's often a lot of confusion about what the National Sports Center is and who owns it. These are state-owned assets. And, we're not asking for more money for new buildings, or to expand buildings. It's just simply to maintain the buildings that are there. In some cases, which were actually gifted to the state. And so, I guess a couple of questions I had. One, I thought with respect to the Mighty Ducks program here that you have here, I didn't know this until we were on this task force, but where that name came from and what the origin of that is, I think helps explain a little bit better what that program is and the importance of it, if one of you wants to take that.
Director?
Madam Chair, Senator, the Mighty Ducks program was established quite a while ago during the height of the Disney movie. Mighty Ducks is where it got its name, but really it's a fantastic public policy intervention, I believe, in terms of addressing Title IX issues at the time. You'll remember there were just simply not enough ice hours for both boys and girls, men and women to play in the state of Minnesota. That program was established originally to build more sheets of ice, and 66 sheets of ice ended up getting built. Since that time, it has morphed into a program that has helped remove whether it's gas edgers or propane-fired Zambonis that cause problems with air quality within rinks. That program's been used for that, and it's also been used for, to make sure that they can replace their R-22 as well. And we've gotten a lot of that money out the door. As soon as it comes in, the committee, I don't believe you're on that committee, but the committee at the Minnesota Amateur Sports Commission makes sure that those dollars get out the door.
Senator Croon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the Mighty Ducks name, as I understand it, I mean, as these the coolants become necessary to change out, if a program like this wouldn't exist, there would be closures of more ice rinks, and the kids that would suffer would be not necessarily the top tier kids. It would be the middle and lower ones that wouldn't have the ice time. And so I think that was the genesis of the name. If you could explain to the committee, another question I had here is how, when I say part of the super rink was gifted to the state of Minnesota, can you walk through how that happened? Because I think it's relevant in terms of a bonding request. If the state didn't even pay for some of these assets, the least we could do is make sure that they're maintained.
Director?
Madam Chair, Senators, It goes back just a little bit, and I actually was a page at the time. And it's, well, Joel, you want to? We do have a commissioner that was part of the original, the formation, so maybe Joel might be able to explain that just a little bit better. I'm sorry.
Mr. Carlson.
Hello, Madam Chair. Joel Carlson, and I have been a member of the Minnesota Amateur Sports Commission since 2003. It is an awesome operation, and what Senator Kroon is referring to is how the original 4 sheets were built by contributions from other entities that gave that facility to the state. It was financed through a revenue bond package through Anoka County, and each of 4 different entities, local hockey associations, committed to the repayment of those bonds by purchasing the ice time with a set contract, and it was a use it or lose it commitment. And so when you go in that building, the first 4 sheets, you'll see Centennial and you'll see Blaine and other youth hockey associations that really committed to get that facility built for the state. And it has been an unbelievable success. We've added 4 sheets to it. Right when I first came on the commission is when we were negotiating to build the additional 4 sheets to make it the largest indoor ice facility in North America. And so it's been a huge success, and we have needs. You might know I do some lobbying on the side, but if I can lobby you on behalf of the Amateur Sports Commission, the needs that we have to maintain this facility are significant. And the R22 and the refrigerant, which we've helped dozens of communities. I am the Mighty Ducks Committee. I'm on, there's 2 of us that are the Mighty Ducks Committee. But the communities that we've helped to upgrade their ice facilities, and some very small communities that without that bump from the state through the Mighty Ducks program would not be able to maintain their facilities. And it's been a great program. But we have a lot of needs that need to be addressed. We didn't really put in all of the repairs in the budget request that we could have, and anything that you can do, it will be appropriately used, because we've been there now 30 plus years, and the facilities are aged and they need significant improvements.
Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And final comment, well, yes, I appreciate that backstory, and the local community did come together to basically finance those back 4 rinks and gift them to the state. But this is much more than just local hockey arenas. I mean, this is a statewide impact. Yes, it's in my district, and that, obviously I'm going to advocate for it for that reason. But this is a statewide asset. Anybody who's been to Blaine knows that people from all over the world come there on a regular basis. And the economic impact of that is massive, not just for Blaine, but for the entire state. So this is a unique facility that is in need of a unique solution to solve its deferred maintenance issues. Thanks.
Thank you. Senator Frantz.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for all the work that you're doing. Mr. Carlson, we're talking about the super rink and some of the impact. How's Minnesota compare to other states in, say, Division I hockey players, men and women, or professionals?
Mr. Carlson.
Madam Chair and Senator Frantz, Minnesota has put more women into college hockey programs than any other state combined. It is the #1 feeding program for collegiate level hockey, for women's ice hockey. Just when you think about it, and Senator Kroon mentioned, it's not just Blaine. We have over 65,000 households participating in hockey in Minnesota. It's the largest youth hockey association in the country. It is just an unbelievable impact. When you watch I just watched last week, and I hope you did too, but Hockey Day in Minnesota and the programming that they've done, it is part of our DNA, and that facility for everyone who gets to come and play there across the state, if you go there in the middle of July, those ice sheets are in use all the time for kids that are coming there for training and summer leagues, and it's just unbelievable. So we have more pro hockey players than any other state in the country. We're running the best men and women, and the most output on female hockey. And I think as a result of our commitment, not just at that facility, but across the state to the sport of ice hockey. Now, I don't even get it going on soccer.
Madam Chair, if I might, Senator Friends,
Johnson.
I'd also just like to say that it is a very unique facility in another way. And in that way, part of this renovation is to make sure that we are the premier sled hockey facility for adaptive hockey and for young kids. So if you think about it, there's a few hockey parents or grandparents in the room. When you think about it, if 2 of those rinks were set up, and the plan is to have 2 of the rinks have all glass boards and 0 egress in and out of the players' boxes, and out of the penalty boxes, I guess, will be the case too. But it just allows for that young athlete, when she pulls up to play the next game in the sled hockey competition, they can also see through the boards, and they can see what's happening. We've talked to USA Hockey in Colorado. They're very excited about that possibility, as are the Defending the Blue Line and other organizations like that.
And Senator Friends, I can tell you, I also sit on the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame Board Museum, and we were running neck and neck with Massachusetts, who had more members in the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame. Minnesota eked out by like 3 or 4 members. But what's happening now in Massachusetts is they're losing a lot of their community rinks. And the kids are now going to play with the higher cost junior teams. So they're not, am I taking away your point? But anyway, they're losing all of their small neighborhood community teams. And so now they are not producing as many hockey players in the pipeline. So Minnesota will probably continue to have more than Massachusetts. But and this R22, this Mighty Ducks program, is so important to our community rinks across the whole state.
Madam Chair, thank you. Senator Kroon, this is a setup. All 4 of my kids played for years, many times at the Super Rink, from 5 years old to the Elite Classic to the NHL Showcase and all the way in between. This is a huge state asset. Senator Housley, if I'm reading this correctly off the internet, and as you know, the internet is never wrong, Minnesota now has 307 NHL players, far more than Massachusetts, and you are so right. The reason is because Minnesota has community-based hockey where kids can grow up in Faribault or Minnesota or Prior Lake or Stillwater and play with their town friends, as opposed to Massachusetts, New York, where they have tuition-based hockey, which I'm stunned by, where a kid that's 10 years old pays $15,000, and tell me about excluding kids at that price range. And the ice costs are $375, $400 an hour. So Senator Kroon, all in for this. Thank you for everything you're doing, and not just at the Super Rink, but across the state for the work for amateur sports. I mean, you're giving kids an opportunity to have a blast, maybe meet some friends and get some exercise. I don't know if you know any of those NHL players, Senator Housley, but they're out there.
Thank you, Senator Friends. Senator Pappas just mentioned to me, this is the most excited our committee's been.
Yeah.
Senator Jasinski.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, but I just can't, pass the opportunity, as long as we're talking about famous hockey institutions, and I know I've toured the one in Blaine, it's phenomenal, but Shattuck St. Mary's in Faribault is also a huge hockey facility in Minnesota, and has produced many players in the NHL. And again, between the feeder program from Blaine to Shattuck St. Mary's and into the NHL, it makes really Minnesota a standout across the nation. So again, a shout out to Shattuck St. Mary's in Faribault.
And I would be remiss if we concluded this committee without mentioning Jim Metzen. When I got elected in 2012 and got here to the Capitol, the first thing he told me about was this Mighty Ducks program and how we had to continue it, and what was coming with the R22 and the rinks. And it used to be Wakota Arena, now it's Doug Woog Arena, but he was so passionate about keeping these rinks across the state of Minnesota. open for exactly what you were talking about, Senator Friends. So thank you, Senator Metzen. All right. Oh, more Senator
One last thing, well, as long as you bring all the show, I mean, we got to bring up Senator Thomasoni as well, who's supportive. I mean, you can't talk about hockey and not bring up former Senator Dave Thomasoni. So, sorry, my heart goes out to his family. I miss him dearly.
The legacy of Senator Thomasoni remains at the facility in Blaine. The money he got us to host, we are the permanent site for the U.S. Women's Olympic Hockey Team because of his efforts to get us money to fix up the locker rooms, to have that team here, so it lives on.
Thank you. All right, members, I think, and thank you for coming to the meeting today, Amateur Sports Commission. Thank you very much. Senator Pappas.
Just a reminder that we're not meeting on Thursday this week, so our next meeting will be next Tuesday.
And next week's agenda is already posted. So there being no further business, the Senate Capital Investment Committee is now adjourned.